The most lethal attacks in human history have rarely come from those who openly declare their hostility. They came from those who stood beside their victims, smiled warmly, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The embrace that preceded the betrayal. The congratulations that masked envy. The friendship that concealed calculation. In the architecture of human destruction, the smiling enemy occupies the most privileged position, not because they possess superior strength, but because they have already breached the walls. They operate from within the circle of trust, where defenses are lowered and vulnerabilities are exposed. To understand why this particular species of adversary proves so devastating, one must first accept an uncomfortable truth. The human mind is hardwired to misread friendliness as safety, and this ancient programming creates a fatal blindness that has destroyed empires, toppled dynasties, and ruined countless lives across the span of recorded history. In the year 1119, the relationship between King Henry I of England and his cousin, William Clito, appeared cordial on the surface. William, son of Henry's imprisoned brother, had been raised with gestures of royal generosity, given lands and titles that suggested familial affection. Henry demonstrated public warmth toward his young cousin, speaking of him with apparent fondness at court gatherings. Yet beneath this display of kinship, Henry recognized what others failed to see. William represented a legitimate threat to his throne, a rallying point for Norman rebels who questioned Henry's claim to power. For years, Henry smiled and embraced his cousin at royal functions, while simultaneously orchestrating a sophisticated campaign to isolate him politically. He showered William with honors that appeared generous but were strategically hollow, positions that carried impressive titles but no real authority. He spoke well of him to foreign courts while quietly undermining his credibility through whispered doubts about his judgment and loyalty. When William finally attempted to claim what he believed was rightfully his, he found himself without allies, his reputation already poisoned by years of careful manipulation disguised as avuncular concern. The king who had smiled at him across countless feasts had spent that entire time constructing his cage. The brilliance of Henry's approach lay not in the betrayal itself, but in the psychological foundation he built beforehand. William never saw the attack coming because the attack had been happening all along, hidden beneath the architecture of apparent goodwill. This is the essential mechanism that makes the smiling enemy so effective. They create a reality in which the victim participates in their own destruction, lowering their guard precisely when vigilance is most needed. The human nervous system evolved over millions of years to make rapid assessments about threats in the physical environment. In ancestral contexts, danger typically announced itself through obvious signals: aggressive postures, hostile expressions, visible weapons. The brain developed shortcuts to process these signals quickly, creating associations between certain cues and the appropriate response. A snarl meant danger. A smile meant safety. This binary system worked reasonably well in small tribal groups, where relationships were transparent and betrayal was immediately visible to the entire community. But as human societies grew more complex, this same hardwiring became a vulnerability that sophisticated operators learned to exploit. The psychological principle at work is known as the halo effect, though its implications extend far beyond the academic definition. When someone presents themselves with warmth, friendliness, and apparent good intentions, the human mind unconsciously extends that positive assessment to all aspects of their character. The smile becomes evidence of trustworthiness. The friendly word becomes proof of loyalty. The helpful gesture becomes confirmation of alliance. This cognitive cascade happens automatically below the threshold of conscious awareness, which is precisely what makes it so difficult to counteract. The rational mind might recognize, in abstract terms, that friendliness can be performed. But the emotional brain, which processes social signals at a more primitive level, continues to respond to those signals as if they were reliable indicators of true intention. This blindness intensifies in hierarchical environments where power is contested but must appear civilized. The modern corporate office building serves as the contemporary theater for this ancient pattern. Consider the colleague who greets you warmly each morning, asks thoughtful questions about your projects, and offers to help with your presentations. Over months, you share your strategies, your concerns about certain executives, your plans for advancement. The relationship feels genuine because the performance is excellent. Laughter comes easily, eye contact is maintained, body language remains open and engaged. What remains invisible is the parallel conversation happening in other offices, where your ideas are being presented as their own, your concerns are being framed as evidence of your poor judgment, and your plans are being systematically blocked through strategic objections raised in meetings you don't attend. By the time the promotion you expected goes to them instead, the trap has already closed. The evidence of their betrayal has been accumulating for months, but you interpreted every interaction through the lens of friendship, which blinded you to the pattern taking shape in the negative space of what they were actually doing. The same mechanism operates in social circles where status and belonging are the currencies being traded. The friend who seems genuinely happy for your successes while subtly undermining your reputation through carefully crafted stories that position you as slightly ridiculous, slightly desperate, slightly less than you appear. They never say anything obviously hostile that would reveal their hand. Instead, they traffic in implications, in raised eyebrows, in stories that sound supportive on the surface but leave a residue of doubt in the listener's mind. They laugh at your jokes while ensuring that others gradually stop inviting you to gatherings. They celebrate your relationship while quietly suggesting to potential partners that you might not be as available as you seem. The destruction happens slowly, through 1,000 small cuts delivered with a smile. Each one deniable, each one wrapped in apparent concern or humor. In romantic contexts, the smiling enemy often appears as the friend who seems to support your relationship while systematically creating doubt and distance between you and your partner. They position themselves as the trusted confidant to both parties, the safe person to whom grievances can be expressed. But information flows selectively. Your partner's frustrations are amplified and reported back to you with editorial additions that make them sound more severe, while your own concerns are shared with your partner in ways that make you appear more demanding or unreasonable than you actually are. The relationship deteriorates as both parties begin to question what they thought they knew about each other, never recognizing that the distortion is being introduced by the supposedly neutral third party who continues to offer sympathetic ears to both sides. When a relationship finally collapses, the smiling enemy is there to provide comfort, having engineered the vacancy they always intended to fill. The particular danger of the smiling enemy lies in their ability to weaponize normal human needs for connection and validation. Humans are social creatures who require some degree of approval and acceptance from their environment. This need creates an exploitable vulnerability. The person who provides warmth and validation gains privileged access to inner thoughts, fears, and plans. Once granted that access, they can operate with devastating effectiveness because they understand the terrain of your psychology in detail. They know which buttons to push, which insecurities to activate, which dreams to undermine. And because they have wrapped themselves in the costume of friendship or alliance, you continue to give them information even as they use it against you. Recognizing the smiling enemy requires a particular form of attention that most people find uncomfortable to maintain. It demands watching not just what people say, but what they do when they think no one is watching. It requires tracking patterns over time rather than responding to individual interactions in isolation. Certain behavioral signatures tend to appear consistently, though they often remain subtle enough to evade immediate detection. The first signal is excessive interest in your affairs, combined with minimal disclosure of their own. The smiling enemy asks many questions, remembers details about your life, and appears deeply engaged with your concerns. But when attention turns to them, they remain vague, deflecting inquiries with humor or changing subjects smoothly. This asymmetry exists because they're gathering intelligence, not building genuine reciprocal connection. Real friendship involves mutual vulnerability. The smiling enemy offers only the appearance of openness while maintaining strategic distance. The second pattern involves strategic praise that carries a subtle edge of diminishment. They compliment you in ways that simultaneously emphasize limitations or create unflattering context. I admire how you just say what you think without worrying about how people react. The compliment on honesty becomes an implication of social awkwardness. It's impressive how hard you work. You're always here so late. The praise for dedication becomes a suggestion that you lack efficiency or work-life balance. These statements are carefully constructed to be defensible if challenged. They sound positive enough that objecting makes you appear paranoid or ungrateful. But their cumulative effect is to position you as someone with significant weaknesses that overshadow your strengths. The third indicator is the phenomenon of information leakage that somehow always flows in one direction. Confidential information you share with them has a curious tendency to become known to others, while information they possess rarely spreads beyond their control. They might frame these leaks as accidents or as necessary disclosures made in your interest, but the pattern reveals the underlying dynamic. They are weaponizing trust while maintaining their own information security. The fourth sign is their reaction to your success. Genuine allies experience your victories as their own and demonstrate this through spontaneous celebration and concrete support. The smiling enemy's response to your advancement carries a quality of performance. Their congratulations arrive quickly but feel hollow. Their enthusiasm slightly forced. More tellingly, they tend to follow your success with subtle reminders of your previous failures or with comments that reframe your achievement as less significant than it appears. Congratulations on the promotion. It's about time they recognized you after all these years. The message ostensibly celebrates your success while implying it was overdue, suggesting that others were reluctant to advance you. The fifth pattern involves triangulation. They frequently position themselves as intermediaries in your relationships with others, offering to communicate messages, provide context, or smooth over conflicts. This position allows them to control information flow and shape narratives about you without you being present to correct distortions. Over time, your direct relationships with others weaken as communication increasingly flows through this supposed helper, who gradually becomes the primary interpreter of your words and intentions to your own network. Those who achieve lasting power understand that protection from smiling enemies requires a different approach than dealing with open adversaries. The visible opponent can be confronted directly, their hostility exposed and neutralized through conventional means. But the smiling enemy must be handled with greater subtlety, because openly accusing them forces a choice. Either you provide evidence that definitively proves their hostility, or you appear paranoid and damage your own credibility. They have engineered the situation so that defending yourself makes you look worse. The strategic response begins with information discipline. The individual who wishes to protect themselves from smiling enemies must cultivate the habit of selective disclosure. Not everyone deserves access to your full thoughts, plans, and vulnerabilities. Friendship and alliance are not binary states, but exist on a spectrum, and different relationships warrant different levels of transparency. This is not paranoia, but appropriate social calibration. You can remain warm and cordial with someone while maintaining strategic boundaries about what you share. The person who tells everyone everything has no defense when someone weaponizes that information. The second element of protection involves independent verification. Rather than accepting anyone's characterization of what others think or feel about you, create opportunities for direct communication. The smiling enemy's power depends on their ability to control narratives and filter information. When you maintain direct relationships and verify claims independently, you eliminate their primary mechanism of manipulation. If someone reports that a colleague has concerns about your work, create an opportunity to speak with that colleague directly rather than accepting the report as accurate. The third component is the careful observation of patterns rather than reacting to individual incidents. A single questionable action might be coincidence or misunderstanding. But when someone consistently behaves in ways that benefit themselves at your expense while maintaining a friendly facade, the pattern reveals the truth that the individual interactions obscure. Document and track. not out of vindictiveness, but as a form of clarity about who you are actually dealing with. The fourth aspect involves strategic distance. Once you have identified someone as a smiling enemy, you need not declare war or cut them off dramatically. Such actions often backfire, allowing them to position themselves as the victim of your aggression. Instead, gradually reduce their access to sensitive information, limit the opportunities they have to operate behind your back, and build relationships with others that don't depend on them as intermediaries. Let the friendship appear to cool naturally through circumstance rather than through obvious rejection. The fifth element is reputation management. The smiling enemy typically works by creating doubt about you in the minds of others. Counter this not through defensive explanations or by attacking them, but through the consistent demonstration of competence, reliability, and integrity. Make their subtle undermining impossible to sustain by ensuring that people's direct experience of you contradicts the narrative they are attempting to construct. Results speak more powerfully than rumors, and consistent character eventually overwhelms whispered implications. The final component is emotional control. The smiling enemy wants you to react emotionally, to appear unstable, paranoid, or vindictive. Your anger and hurt serve their purposes by making their subtle accusations seem credible. The individual who maintains composure, who continues to function effectively while implementing protective measures, denies them the dramatic confirmation they seek. This requires accepting that not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well, and that this fact is not a reason for despair, but simply an accurate map of social reality. In the final analysis, the danger of the smiling enemy stems from a fundamental mismatch between human social instincts and the complexity of modern social environments. We evolved to trust those who demonstrate warmth because, in small ancestral groups, the cost of false friendliness was too high to be sustainable. The betrayer would be identified and expelled from the community, losing the protection and resources the group provided. But in large, complex societies where people can move between contexts and reinvent themselves repeatedly, the old signals no longer guarantee safety. The smile has become a tool like any other, available to those who understand that appearing friendly provides access that appearing hostile does not. The empowered individual does not respond to this reality with cynicism or isolation, but with clearer vision. They recognize that genuine warmth exists and remains valuable, but they also understand that friendliness must be verified through patterns of behavior over time rather than accepted on appearance alone. They cultivate the ability to receive smiles without immediately granting trust, to accept friendliness without surrendering vigilance. This is not paranoia, but discernment. The recognition that in the game of power and position, danger rarely announces itself with snarls and threats. It walks through the front door wearing your favorite smile, shakes your hand warmly, and waits patiently for you to turn your back.